short period of time in Crafton as our ambulance provider, they had the absolute best response time in Allegheny County, and that is a fact. They unsurpassed. So if any of you in the audience that spoke tonight think that this is acceptable, then you need to look in that camera and tell that to the people that are our residents. It's not acceptable, and so that's why we are here.
One more question. Mr. Amendola, can I see Northwest Times?
Sure.
While you're reviewing that, the solicitor had a couple of questions.
Sure, initially, you wanted me to comment. There is not an obligation to do this through an RFP process. That's something you can do, but you as council have the ultimate choice in who you decide upon. I think I had some questions regarding the structure. I understand if you as a council would, hire someone directly, whether it be Northwest or Robinson as it has been in the past. I've heard two different things regarding the role of the volunteer fire department, and I just kind of want to have an understanding of it from a document standpoint. I at first had an understanding that the volunteer fire department would be the contracted provider of EMS, and then it would sub it out to another entity. But then tonight I've heard that the volunteer fire department would act as the manager of sorts, that they would manage, evaluate, and select the EMS provider. So if I can have an explanation of what the role that the volunteer fire department would have, so when it's documented, I know how to properly document it.
I'm not so sure selecting, but we were going to oversee making sure response times, performance standards, all those things were met. I don't think selecting, yes, we would have a hand in the selecting by gathering the information, but there would be a pass-through for council to reach through that agreement to say, hey, you're not doing your job. Currently, the current agreement has none of those performance standards in those, so this agreement would actually have those types of standards in there.
Has anyone considered, if the council would choose to go down a path where the volunteer fire department is involved, having a separate management agreement of sorts with the volunteer fire department and then contracting directly with whoever the service provider is?
That could be. With that too is we would be providing the QRS service.
What's involved in that?
That would be the quick response vehicle, which would tie that all together within the consolidated approach.
You would be doing that exclusively, or
Yes,
the
we would
first?
be doing that
Okay.
for QRS, not for the.
Quick question. I asked for Northwest. This is all right?
No, I don't have Northwest.
Oh, okay.
No.
So you would be managing, so I use the word managing to kind of encompass the oversight, evaluating, performance, etc.
Right.
And you would be managing and providing a part of the service?
Yes.
Okay.
So I'd like to just ask a question to council at large, right, just to kind of foster for more discussion. If not the volunteer fire department to oversee and manage this service, who do we think it should be?
Well, the chief has a lot on his plate, I feel. But he's got two sergeants there that might be able to take care of one of those roles, if you ask them. I don't know if it'd be in the agreement of the police department or not.
You couldn't do that. It's like the bargaining issue. You couldn't add a work title or obligation or duty to the police department without bargaining to do so.
Okay. Another thing, I'm just wondering if having the fire department take care of this, if it's not a conflict of any kind with the fire department. Especially if they ask for money.
There's no money. None of those agreements.
At this time, you said.
Yeah, there's no, you can look through any agreement, there is no money.
But at a time when it does come where money's involved, should the fire department step down? So why are we going through this process?
You never know what the future will bring. If Medicare cut-downs would say, hey, we're not going to be able to bill, that would be a community issue that we'd all have to discuss. It wouldn't be that we're going to talk about. I think the days of a service paying anybody is probably to the wayside. It's more or less the community's paying to somebody. If you look at some of the authorities out there, Merck's, Valley, some of those, they bill their respective communities. for the service. We're lucky that we don't have to bill or pay a bill from our provider for that service.
I just feel that, I think there's a law against a right to pay, right to play, a pay to play.
There's nothing like
Nothing
that.
like
If you're
that.
asking that, that's absolutely not true.
There's nothing like that.
Nothing, not true.
Okay?
All right, but back to my question, right, so as it has been explained to me by the solicitor, right, this council can't enter into an agreement that binds any future council. So whatever decision we make
Mhm.
can be changed as of January 1st when a new council sits.
That's how that contract
Yeah,
reads.
so we're making,
What
we'll be,
contract are we talking
there's a draft contract in Covey.
The one they come up with Northwest,
about? The one that got posted today,
Yeah.
hours before this meeting.
which
Yeah.
I never seen until I.
And that's why there's no motion to act tonight, because it wasn't available early enough. But it was made available to discuss.
Who wrote it?
It's a contract between the Crafton Volunteer Fire Department, Northwest, and Carnegie.
The question was who wrote it?
The combination of all three,
All three of them?
all three entities had input into the rate. There was nothing drafted or formalized because, as talking to Mr. Hayes, that wouldn't be our doing, that would be up to our solicitor to make sure everything was
Oh,
in line.
wasn't it the committee that came up with this? I thought.
The committee came up with the contract? No.
No?
There's the contract that is posted is just for the service. There's nothing between the council and the service provided, because that would be up to council.
And that hasn't even started
Right.
to be drafted.
So we need ambulance service April 4th.
We do.
Yes.
So this is ludicrous to even attempt to have this discussion and putting three entities in this mix when in less than 2 weeks we need service.
Already taken care of.
Is it, is it ludicrous to have an agreement drafted in that time frame and executed?
How can
I think if there's a clarity of the roles and responsibilities of all the entities, you know, a Scrivener could put that together. I think you need to work through that, though. I mean, that's kind of a question that doesn't have an easy answer without understanding. And if you came to me today and said, here's the deal, everyone's in agreement, you know, we're gonna have the volunteer department do this, Northwest is gonna do this, Carnegie's gonna do this, the borough's gonna contract with whatever entity it contracts with, here's the structure of it, draft it, that's easy. I think what is difficult is if you haven't had a structure that everyone agrees to, understands, and established, and then you're scrambling to put that together at a last minute, that would be very difficult. So it depends on the facts.
So that actually takes us back to the original question I had. So if not the volunteer fire department to oversee this, who do you suggest do it? I see two options. I see the manager potentially doing it, and I see the chair of public safety doing it, right? Or chair of, yeah. So of those three folks, who do we think is best qualified to oversee it?
Why not come up with a three-team committee to oversee it instead of one person?
Three-team committee.
Or even a two-team
The
committee?
fire department is the most natural thing, come on. They're in the business. It's the most natural way to do it. It's an everyday thing going on. The fire department is the most natural entity to oversee it. Can't pick this guy or that guy because you don't like the fire department or you don't like this or that.
Okay, so I think this is an important point to make. Fred thinks it's the fire department. Where does everyone else stand? April, where do you stand?
I stand for transparency, visibility into what we're even trying to attempt to do. I mean, this is the first I'm hearing of three entities involved in something that the borough council has always taken care of. So for me, I feel like I'm in the dark. I feel like the public citizens, what's going on? I hear Carnegie, I've never once spoken to anyone from Carnegie. You have Northwest in this contract, potential contract. I've not spoken to any of those people as a member of council who is expected to vote on this. And we have 2 weeks. That's the other piece of this. 2 weeks to put something into place. we're in over our heads. This council's not ready to vote on anything like this.
Mayor?
David's here, he's the voter.
I'm gonna ask everyone, okay, David?
It's never easy. My opinion is that people who deal with the emergency medical services on a regular basis should have some oversight on that to protect the borough. I don't see anybody, I can't see any resident, a resident should not have to rely on a council person to do that, because we are not an emergency medical people for the most part. Councils change, managers change. So, that being said, I think it's not necessarily a bad idea for the fire department to oversee it. But it sounds like there are some definite concerns that need to be ironed out first. And I do not think we should rush into something that is not settled. And I don't think, I think it needs to be settled before we move forward. And the people who know this stuff need to settle this for us. I don't want to be blindsided in these meetings, discussing all night, having the residents concerned, having council concerned. Like April said, we should all be on the same page, at least with the information, so we can all make a logical, rational decision on this.
I worked here 33 years. I know everything that went on downstairs, all of that, and everything considered. Bottom line, this is just not acceptable. And our fire department is the most natural entity to take care of it for us. They've talked to people, they've gotten all this together. They can make this happen. They can make it happen. We have to give them our blessing to go ahead and do that. That's why we're here. We're here to say, okay, let's get this going. And you know, you want to throw horseshoes into the whole thing, or wrenches into the gears.
We just want information.
Well, you got to come to more meetings, Miss April. You know what I mean?
When
When
were
were the
they?
meetings? When were they?
The meetings. Well, we probably have a list of meetings that you missed.
That's
You know, we talked
We
about
didn't
this.
discuss
We've
this?
talked about
Okay.
this since December. Since
Okay.
December.
Mr. Amendola, how many meetings have I missed?
I don't know.
You knew how many she missed, how many did I miss?
She missed a lot.
How many did I miss?
I don't know.
Exactly.
Wasn't keeping
And
track.
I don't remember much of a discussion about this. I didn't come to no council meetings,
You
no
remember we
no
discussed
committee
it
meetings.
in December?
Yes, I do.
Okay.
That back in
Yeah, let's not,
December.
yeah, that was an executive session.
Right, that was-
That was an
right,
executive session, let's not discuss that.
That was in December, and since it was in December, it should have been put out to bid, just like the solicitor and everybody else that was put out to bid. And this was not.
We can talk all night about what was done in the past and how many times people have gone to the meeting. We've come to a point right now where we have to move forward on something, and we have to come to a consensus on how we are going to move forward on this, so everybody's on the same page, so everybody is comfortable. At least, so everybody at least feels they have the information that they need to make a decision on it. I do not get that feeling right now. I really don't.
So we have to make a decision. I mean, we're not deciding, we're not voting tonight, but the consensus, to echo what you're saying, right? We have to give direction to the manager to go forth with, to proceed down some path to have emergency medical services by April 4th, right? I think there's two options. We can ask the manager to continue to push forward where the volunteer fire department oversees this, and we work through contract language around who would provide it, or we can ask the manager to go forth and try to find another provider. And it may be, Robinson may stay in place if they're willing, or a different party. But this council has to give that manager direction.
I totally agree, and I also look at the fact that we have 2 weeks.
So what do you think? Which way? Oh, hold up. What?
The smart thing, the prudent thing to do is to go with who you currently have in place, instead of trying to like put these other entities
So these
together.
numbers are acceptable to you? You wanna look in that camera and tell our residents
I
that
will.
these numbers are acceptable to you? Are they acceptable to you? They're national standards.
The numbers
They cannot meet the national standards.
The numbers I
How
looked
can
at,
you look
all
at those
these
people and tell
papers.
them that this is acceptable to you? How can you do that? How can you
What
sit here?
information am I,
and block this
what
whole thing?
information am I getting to tell me that
Would
that's
you like
not
a copy?
I want to see Northwest, which you conveniently do not have. I looked at that. I want to see
All right,
Northwest.
heck, time out, guys.
Okay.
So Fred,
You're all just holding this up. If
Well,
you
we
let,
want us.
That's
if you let
convenient.
nature
Solicitor
take its
hasn't even
course
looked at this.
and let our solicitor review this agreement and move forward. I mean, there's no sense of holding back and going through all this BS.
Perhaps we should vote, put a motion together.
I was under the impression that this was all gonna be part of our, compensation plan, or our comprehensive plan, I'm sorry, and that we wanted to consolidate the fire department, have our own ambulance service, so that we're able to run everything more efficiently. I mean, the fire department, they're the ones who are showing up before Robinson EMS. So why not have our own ambulance service?
What?
Huh?
She's talking about when they had a QRS.
No, we had an ambulance, up
Used
till
to.
like
Oh,
years ago.
yeah, in the past, yeah.
Years ago, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, but with that, we can't do that in the next, we can't get a truck.
Can we get a consensus or vote to have the solicitor review that?
But we don't have to, we just have to come up with a consensus, right? We don't have to vote. Let's let the mayor speak, because he hasn't had a chance to speak, and he has something to say. And then I'll suggest something and see if we can close on this topic. Go ahead.
The contract that's in effect right now calls for EMS service, paramedic EMS service, 24/7, 365. In my opinion, where RIMS is right now, they can't provide that service to us. It's in our contract, and they haven't been providing that service as 24/7, 365. As early as last week or the week before, there was a incident where a person was stabbed, and there was an evisceration, and it was 14 minutes before an ambulance arrived on scene from Scott Township. From what I understand, the call was, Robinson was unavailable. Also, 3 other calls the same day. Reds didn't handle the calls. Now, most people in the communities, Grafton, whatever, they are driven by what they're told. If this is not an issue at council, nobody really cares. You know what it's like at a council meeting. We don't have people every week at every council meeting. We have a few dedicated people that show up all the time. When an issue comes to pass, or this issue in particular became to the forefront back in December when we found out this contract was coming in April, and it was an automatic renewal for, I believe, 5 years, and check me on that if I'm wrong. That's when the people started showing up. I received a call from a person down at Crafton Towers, and that they told me on the phone that the EMS service was down providing blood screens, blood pressure screen, or whatever. It was telling the residents that they were gonna be without EMS service. That Crafton was gonna kick Robinson out. This is what the call came to me. And I told that person not to get excited, that the borough would never be without EMS service for the residents. Now, these scare tactics are terrible, and I just feel that if you can't come to a decision as to what to do today, it should go back to the RFP process and have the presentations. When we had presentations when I was on council, back in 2008, we had 3 providers that came to council. They provided their spiel on what they would provide to the borough. At that time, Northwest was given the contract. And then, like Joe, you stated before, Dave, you stated before, councils come and go. 5 months later, there was a council change. And for no reason at all, the new council decided we're gonna chuck Northwest out. For no reason other than it was in the contract, 90 days notice or 60 days notice, and they chucked Northwest out of the borough. For no reason. They brought Robinson back in. This was after there were people brought down from Crafton Plaza to stand here and hold signs up and all this. I was here for that. It was ridiculous. Now, for the council to be facing this and to have information that the citizens are not being provided the contracted medical services. And I could state other situations where things have happened that I've been informed through the police department that happened. But I'm not here for that. I'm here for what you guys gotta do. You gotta get this right. One way or the other. You just can't go back and forth and accuse people of this and accuse people of that. 95, how many people we got this community? 6,000, 7,000, how many are here? 15? The rest of the people don't know what's going on. And until they hear and know what's going on, you ask somebody that's got their intestines hanging out what it's like for 14 minutes to go by, waiting for medics. That's a long time. You start a clock, let me know if 14 minutes is up. Somebody's got to check whether Robinson stays or Carnegie comes in or some contractor, whatever. They have to be checked. And I've had the police department maintaining those logs and maintaining the time and who shows up at our calls. Now, until somebody oversees what's going on, you got crappy EMS service. That's my opinion, Mr. Mayor. And that's all I want to say.
So, in a meeting in 2 weeks, we have to make a decision on who's going to continue with EMS. It seems like we've got a couple of options, right? All this discussion, there seems to be 3 players at large. Robinson, Carnegie, and Northwest, in some form or fashion. So,
And the Crafton Volunteer Fire Department.
Crafton Volunteer Fire Department is only suggesting that they oversee, right?
And doing the QRS,
And the QR, and doing the QRS.
which I don't see is in this contract.
Yes, that was one of,
There's no reference to the you're named as a party, and I just read it right now, right? But it doesn't have anything to say what the volunteers should do, what their responsibilities are, obligations, etc.
in the rush to try to get the agreement in, there was some other things that we've made note on, but that will be taken care of.
Have you noted like insurance, for example, if all 3 entities are providing some level of service, all 3 entities should provide insurance and indemnity and all that? Okay.
And I think it's in there.
All right, because each one would have,
Each one
normally if you
has-
have one
I
provider.
think it says it in there, each service has to name the borough Crafton.
And have a minimum level of insurance for whatever role it undertakes.
Right, so, and the reason I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, why Carnegie and Northwest are being proposed as part of the contract between Crafton Volunteer Fire Department and those entities is because that is what seems to be the most logical in terms of consolidation, because the communities that we've been asked to consolidate with, that's who their providers are.
Well, Carnegie has their own provider. Ingram has their own provider. They both rely on Northwest as a secondary provider. So this makeup, we would still have that look and still have the backing of a system status management group that would make sure that we always have consecutive 24/7.
Right, so if
So
we,
can I jump in there? I'm sorry,
Yeah, go.
because that's important to me, Hunter. Who's the primary provider then?
The primary provider would be the group between Carnegie and Northwest. I think there's a further MOU that they have to.
It's reference, I need to see that.
Oh, yeah.
See, because my concern would be, as the borough, I need to know who the borough's contracting
Right.
with, right? So that if there's ever, I'm not even saying an issue that rises to the level of, we're putting you on notice you're being sued, but just something, an issue to address.
Right.
A normal who we pick up the phone and calling? The Volunteer Fire Department, Northwest EMS, Carnegie EMS, or is it somebody, are you gonna have a designated point person? Because you're not a legal entity, you're three
Right.
parties sharing the role. And I think something like that needs to be articulated, who's the point, who you deal with. Sounds like the borough would have to contract with 3 entities, each providing a different role in one contract.
And how does that benefit the residents?
It does, because.
Response times.
Yeah, response, care, level of care, service provider, we can watch over all that, because eventually, once this consolidation does work out, that's going to be all consolidated into one.
yeah, but if we divorce that into two separate questions, who provides the service, who oversees the service? Right? We can ask the manager to ask Robinson to come in 2 weeks, we can ask the manager to have Carnegie come in 2 weeks, we can ask the manager to have Northwest come in 2 weeks, and anyone else that we think could provide the service, let them present. But then separately, we should ask ourselves, who do we want to oversee that service? Council, the manager, the council that might be coming, the manager that may be changed, or the volunteer fire department, and treat it as two separate questions.
Can I make a comment then?
Yeah.
If you're in 2 weeks, you're gonna have presentations, there's no way you're gonna have a contract reviewed, prepared, and ready to be voted on in 2 weeks to be effective 1st of April.
How long are you gonna need to review what you have in front of you and draw it or add to it or take from it? How long do you need to do
I can
that?
have that, if you're telling me, Tom, this is the format we want you to have documented, I can work in the next 2 weeks to have that. I can see there's a lot I need, like I need to see the MOU, I can see there's nothing in here for both as a benefit to the borough and the volunteer. There's nothing in there that articulates what the volunteer's role is. I don't see how
Termination clause in there.
payments are provided to what entity. It's harder to, it's 3 entities providing one service, and I think your council president articulated it well. You need to understand first who's going to provide the service and who's going to oversee it. And it sounds like, if I'm listening tonight and you would go with this scenario, Fred, that the service would be provided in some combination of the volunteer fire department always doing the QRS, and Northwest being the primary provider and Carnegie being the backup. Or the other way around? Other way around. Carnegie being the primary provider, Northwest being the backup, and also with the volunteer fire department overseeing all 3 entities, itself and the other 2.
Yes.
It might be easier to contract with one entity, make them responsible, and let them subcontract out, and give the borough rights in your contract to have recourse against not only the party you contract with, but anybody they subcontract to, and the right of approval of anybody they subcontract to. Then I know who I'm dealing with, and it's easy. So if there's a problem, I'm not picking up the phone and calling 3 places and figuring out who I should be dealing with. I'm calling whoever it is you tell me is the primary contracting party.
Sounds
Mr. President, can we authorize him to do that?
Yeah, we can do that. But we can also,
And it can get done within 2 weeks.
Will I get it done in 2 weeks? To the extent I have a role in a 4-party agreement, I will make sure that I will not be the person holding it up, or my office will not
Okay.
be. But to the extent EMS, Carnegie EMS might have its own attorney, Northwest EMS might have its own attorney, and the volunteer fire department's gonna have its own attorney, you're now coordinating 4 lawyers in one agreement. unless I have my way, which would be, I'm contracting with one party, and it would be easier for me to do that. And you would tell me who that is, whether it's Northwest, Carnegie, or your volunteer fire department.
Can we
And
do
if
it
it's
that
not
way?
your volunteer fire department, I would suggest you have a separate contract then with your volunteer fire department as to their managerial responsibilities.
This all came about with John Tran had